Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to move on to our conversation about some specific time periods, namely the Paleolithic age. And I'm going to do this a little differently today because in the classroom, we're using this slide. We also have access to the textbooks and different things, but I'm going to break it down for you all that are doing this online because obviously I don't want to have to give you all a ton of different pages to read through for just a couple of terms. Okay. So what we're going to do here is obviously we'll reference backwards for a second. If you all remember, we were talking about these artifacts and just them being returned to their countries of origin or whatever. That was just kind of an opening question for the rest of this unit, which again is mostly about the Paleolithic and or kind of early Stone Age periods, like early human ages. Okay, so we want to say a few things about these people, these early people, by using these terms right here. Because the word nomad or nomadic goes with these people. The dual term hunter gatherer goes with these people, and the term agrarian. Now, for Paleolithic age, what we're going to do is we're going to add three things to this. Okay, so everything we see and say here today should be added to the notebook for obviously background information to go with the unit. Okay, so first of all, let's just start with the word nomadic. And every one of these, I'm going to just add a little text box and just write some things. And then you all obviously can add that. And then I'm going to probably delete it so we have space. The term nomadic in this case means that people always move around. Okay, so we're going to put in the box here constant movement. Okay, so constant movement is part of the deal, and I'll kind of make it bigger and make it show up a little bit more. So constant movement, and I'm just going to put next to it searching for food. Okay, we'll talk about this real quick, and then again, we're going to probably get rid of this. So here's the deal with this. I'll click off of this. Nomads or nomadic means that a group of people, again, is constantly moving. Now, I'm not saying they move every single day, but they usually move along with their food source or different seasons of the year due to weather. Okay, so these early humans, these early humans did exactly that. They moved around following the food sources and they moved around due to different weather patterns. Okay, so they kind of are in a constant state of movement. They don't really have any permanent homes. Now, that doesn't mean that they necessarily never went back to a place because they did, right? If they knew of a good cave for the winter, they would probably go there every winter. If they knew of a good fishing spot for the summer, they would probably go back to that spot. But again, they're constantly rotating between those spots. And the reason they're rotating again is because they're always in the search for food. None of it is obviously at that point for any kind of jobs or work or money or anything because those things did not exist way back then. So, for the term nomadic, I think again, we're pretty good with constant movement and the search for food. So again, I'm going to just kind of get rid of this guy and we're going to move on to hunter gatherer. Okay, this one's pretty easy, but these early people were hunter gatherers in the sense that they hunted for food, which I don't really need to say anything. But next to gatherer, I'm going to put for food in nature. So let me make this again kind of more easily viewable here. But realistically, when we're talking about hunters, that one speaks for itself, right? We know that these people hunted animals for food and they followed those herds to kind of obviously just keep close to where the food source was. So a lot of these early people were hunters because of that reason. Now, the term gatherer is connected because they weren't one or the other. There weren't any groups that were just hunters and they didn't eat like things that they could gather. And there definitely weren't groups that just gathered and wouldn't eat meat. Okay, so it's not like like a vegetarian type thing. It just means that they actually did both. Now, the gatherer part, I put for food in nature because when you see this term gatherer, that means literally what it says. They didn't do anything as far as planting it. They literally gathered it. They found natural things like nuts and berries in the woods and the different forested areas, and they just gathered what was there naturally. Okay, they didn't really do anything as far as creating it or planting it. They just kind of had to find it naturally. Okay, there's going to be a difference there between this word right here, agrarian, but we're going to figure this out real quick. Okay, so we know they're nomadic because they're constantly moving around. We know that they're hunters hunting for food, and they're gatherers gathering of things that are already found in nature. And we're going to move on to agrarian. Okay, for agrarian, I'm going to put two words that you might affiliate with this, and that is agriculture, and the other word is farming. Okay, so believe it or not, these two words pretty much mean the exact same thing. Okay, so the term agrarian is the same as the term agriculture. Okay, people who are farmers deal with agriculture, and they are agrarian people. So if you see agrarian society mentioned during this unit, they're talking about people who grew crops. Okay, now, the thing about being agrarian or agricultural or a farmer is that it's different from gatherers. We already mentioned this, but gatherers don't do any work as far as planting crops. They just find the stuff naturally and they gather it and they eat it. Whereas farmers clearly learned how to put seeds in the ground and grow those crops where they wanted those crops, and they could water them and make as much as they could possibly want, hopefully, if they had enough space for their fields. But that's a big difference. Okay, so what you're going to see here throughout this unit is early people were more nomadic because of the hunting, and they did some gathering. And then later on, they become more agrarian because they can plant crops, they can stay in one place, and they obviously don't have to do as much work as far as the hunting and the gathering people. Okay, so that's good for that one. The Paleolithic age here, I'm going to do something a little different. There's actually going to be three parts to this. Okay, so the Paleolithic age is one part of what's known as the Stone Age. Okay, people have probably heard of the Stone Age before because the Stone Age is named for that reason, that most things were made out of stone. So stone tools like arrowheads and axes and things like that. Okay, so the Stone Age is a big time period. The first part I'm going to put here, though, is that Paleolithic is actually the first part of the Stone Age. Okay, so it's actually the first part of the Stone Age, right? The whole Stone Age itself is a big chunk of time, but the Paleolithic is actually the earliest part of that timeline. Okay, so I'll click off of this real quick just to kind of give you an idea. But for Paleolithic, you have this being the first part of the bigger Stone Age. Okay, now, how big was it? How long was the Paleolithic age? Well, I'm going to get rid of this real quick, and I'm going to tell you. The length of it is actually counting backwards, but it's 2.5 million years ago. So basically, BC, obviously by a long shot. So basically, 2.5 million BC, only off by about 2,000 years, so that's not really that big of a time period. And it goes all the way up to 8,000 BC. Okay, so if you're looking at this, that's a long stretch of time. So if we were looking at this as a timeline, the year zero, let's say, would be over here, and you'd be counting backwards. So 8,000 BC is actually kind of the end of this Paleolithic time period. And to get to the beginning of it, we'd have to go way backwards to 2.5 million years ago. So if you see this time range here, that's a really long chunk of time. 2.5 million years ago to about 8,000 BC. Okay. So the last part here of Paleolithic is what the word paleo actually means. And I bet you can figure this out when we talk about it. But it actually means old stone. The word paleo means old stone or old stone age. Okay, so that's the third part of this. So if you think about it, the Paleolithic age is the oldest part of the Stone Age. The time period of it is super long because it goes again from 8,000-ish BC to way back about 2.5 million years ago. And if you notice the term, this is a Greek term, paleo, meaning old stone. That again goes with the terms we've already kind of set out, right? So you have this old stone or old Stone Age time period. Okay, real quick to wrap this up, these two questions at the bottom, we're just going to wrap these together. As far as you all writing them, you don't even really need to write them unless you really wanted to just jot this first one down because it kind of go together with what we have been discussing here in class. But basically, the question says, how do we know things about the past without written evidence or without written language? How did people communicate? Well, let's put them together. We know a lot of things about the past because of what we've already talked about over the last couple of days. We will find fossils somewhere in the ground, and we could study those things to figure out how the environment was or kind of how the earth was at that time. We can study artifacts that were actually made by humans, and we can study if they have any kind of cloth or any kind of stone or any kind of writing or paint or who knows what. Okay, so even though this prehistory, as it's known, doesn't really have any written things that we could kind of study from because obviously they didn't necessarily have a language invented way back then. We know things about this time period because of those fossils and artifacts. Okay, so that's technically the first question. The second one just says, without using written language, how do people communicate? Well, obviously, this example up here goes with that. So things like cave paintings, and obviously, they had oral language. So they obviously said words or made different sounds. It's just been so long since anybody's ever used that that we have no idea what they were, right? So things from 2.5 million years ago definitely are not going to get passed on along the generations, okay? So for today, you guys are good on this. I hope you just added the notes that you needed, and we'll talk to you all very, very soon. All right, thanks.